The morning mist rises from the Rhine frontier. A Centurion Marcus Brutus Maximus surveys his century, preparing for another day of patrol duty along Rome's most dangerous border. You find yourself watching a man whose weathered face tells the story of 25 years defending the empire, every scar a testament to battles fought in Germania's dark forests and Gaul's treacherous marshlands. At 45, Marcus carries himself with the rigid discipline that marks Rome's professional soldiers, but there's something haunted in those brown eyes that speaks of a pain no military victory can heal. The fortress of Mogontiacum bustles with the controlled chaos of military life as legionaries sharpen weapons, check armor, and prepare for duties that keep barbarian tribes from crossing into Roman territory. You observe Marcus moving through his familiar routines, inspecting equipment, reviewing patrol reports, conferring with fellow officers, but even these practiced activities can't distract him from the emptiness that has consumed his life for the past 5 years. What makes this particular morning different from countless others is the arrival of a messenger from Rome carrying news that will shatter everything Marcus thought he knew about his greatest failure as a father. The sealed scroll contains information from Gaius Flavius, his oldest friend and fellow centurion, who has been conducting a personal investigation in the capital that Marcus never dared hope would yield results. The message is brief but devastating. My friend, I have found traces of your son in the Gladiator schools of Rome. Come immediately. There may still be time. Those simple words transform Marcus from a disciplined professional soldier into a desperate father whose world suddenly contains the possibility of redemption he never allowed himself to imagine. The backstory that haunts Marcus begins 5 years earlier, when his marriage to Claudia was already crumbling under the strain of military life and his extended absences on campaign. Their only child, Lucius, had grown from a bright, curious boy into a rebellious young man who resented his father's rigid discipline and his mother's bitter complaints about their isolated military existence. You watch through Marcus's tortured memories as that terrible night unfolds again. The argument that escalated beyond anything they had experienced before. Angry words that cut deeper than any barbarian blade. And Lucius's final declaration that he would rather die than follow in his father's military footsteps. The boy had stormed out into the darkness, and despite days of searching through surrounding forests and villages, no trace of him was ever found.
The journey to Rome becomes a race against time and Marcus's own fears as he travels with the desperate urgency of someone who understands that this may be his only chance to repair the most devastating failure of his life. Every mile brings memories of the son he lost, teaching Lucius to use a sword, sharing stories of military campaigns, trying to bridge the gap between his duty to Rome and his love for his family. The reunion with Gaius takes place in a tavern near the Campus Martius, where his friend's grim expression immediately confirms Marcus's worst fears about what his investigation has revealed. "I found him through contacts in the Gladiator schools," Gaius reports quietly. "He's been fighting under the name Taurus for 3 years, purchased from slavers who claimed he was a Germanic captive. Marcus, he doesn't know I've been asking about him, and from what I've learned, he may not want to be found." The revelation that his son has been enslaved and forced to fight for the entertainment of Roman crowds hits Marcus like a physical blow. The boy who once declared he would never serve Rome has been transformed into a killer who spills blood for the amusement of the very citizens his father has spent a lifetime protecting. The irony is cruel beyond imagination, and the guilt that follows threatens to destroy what remains of Marcus's ability to function as either a soldier or a father. But worse than the knowledge of Lucius's enslavement is Gaius's warning about his son's current situation. "He's scheduled to fight in the games next week," his friend explains. "It's supposed to be his final contest before earning his freedom, but the matches have been rigged. The Lanista who owns him has bet heavily against his survival. Marcus, if you're going to act, it has to be now.
The search through Rome's gladiator schools becomes a journey through the empire's darkest entertainment industry, where human beings are transformed into living weapons for public spectacle. You follow Marcus as he moves through training facilities where men prepare to die for the pleasure of crowds who see them as less than human, each visit bringing him closer to the son he failed to protect and may now be powerless to save. The investigation reveals the brutal economics of gladiatorial entertainment, how young men disappear from frontier towns, how desperate families sell children to pay debts, how the insatiable appetite for arena blood creates markets in human misery that span the entire Mediterranean. Marcus begins to understand that his son's disappearance wasn't simply a family tragedy, but part of a systematic industry that feeds on the empire's most vulnerable citizens. His inquiries lead him through a network of trainers, merchants, and officials whose casual discussion of buying and selling human lives makes his soldier's stomach turn. These aren't barbarian enemies he can face with sword and shield, but Roman citizens whose prosperity depends on the suffering of others, protected by laws that treat gladiators as property rather than people. The breakthrough comes when Marcus finally locates the ludus where his son has been held, a massive compound near the Colosseum where hundreds of fighters live and train in conditions that make military barracks seem luxurious by comparison. The owner, Quintus Maximus Brutus, proves to be a shrewd businessman who immediately recognizes both the opportunity and the threat that Marcus represents. "Your son is one of my best fighters," Brutus explains, with the cold calculation of someone who views human beings as investments. He's survived longer than most and developed quite a following among the crowds. But he's also proven difficult to manage. Perhaps we can reach an arrangement that serves both our interests.
The moment that changes everything comes when Marcus attends the gladiator training sessions, hoping to catch a glimpse of the son he hasn't seen in 5 years. The sight that greets him in the practice arena stops his heart. A young man whose movements mirror his own military training, whose face carries features inherited from both parents, whose eyes hold the same fierce intelligence that once made Marcus so proud. But this isn't the rebellious boy who stormed out of their home. This is Taurus, a professional killer whose body bears the scars of dozens of arena battles, whose reflexes have been honed by years of fighting for his life against opponents trained to show no mercy. The transformation is both magnificent and heartbreaking. Marcus sees his own warrior spirit reflected in his son's movements, but also recognizes the emotional armor that shields the young man from feelings that could get him killed. The recognition is mutual and immediate. Despite years of separation, despite the radical changes in their circumstances, father and son know each other instantly. But the reunion Marcus had imagined countless times during his journey to Rome doesn't happen. Instead, Lucius turns away without a word, his expression revealing a mixture of anger, shame, and something that might be disappointment that his father has finally found him. The conversation that eventually occurs takes place in the relative privacy of the ludus's equipment room, where the tools of gladiatorial combat create a grim backdrop for their first words in half a decade. "I told you I would rather die than be a soldier," Lucius says quietly, his voice carrying the flat emotionlessness of someone who has learned to suppress feelings for survival. "It seems the gods granted my wish, just not in the way I expected." Marcus's response reveals how much his son's disappearance has changed him, tempering his military rigidity with hard-won wisdom about the cost of duty and the importance of family bonds that can't be restored through discipline or commands. "I came here to bring you home," he tells his son, not as a soldier retrieving a deserter, but as a father who failed his child and wants the chance to do better.
The moment that changes everything comes when Marcus attends the Gladiator training sessions, hoping to catch a glimpse of the son he hasn't seen in 5 years. The sight that greets him in the practice arena stops his heart. A young man whose movements mirror his own military training, whose face carries features inherited from both parents, whose eyes hold the same fierce intelligence that once made Marcus so proud. But this isn't the rebellious boy who stormed out of their home. This is Taurus, a professional killer whose body bears the scars of dozens of arena battles, whose reflexes have been honed by years of fighting for his life against opponents trained to show no mercy. The transformation is both magnificent and heartbreaking. Marcus sees his own warrior spirit reflected in his son's movements, but also recognizes the emotional armor that shields the young man from feelings that could get him killed. The recognition is mutual and immediate. Despite years of separation, despite the radical changes in their circumstances, father and son know each other instantly. But the reunion Marcus had imagined countless times during his journey to Rome doesn't happen. Instead, Lucius turns away without a word, his expression revealing a mixture of anger, shame, and something that might be disappointment that his father has finally found him. The conversation that eventually occurs takes place in the relative privacy of the Ludus's equipment room, where the tools of gladiatorial combat create a grim backdrop for their first words in half a decade. "I told you I would rather die than be a soldier," Lucius says quietly, his voice carrying the flat emotionlessness of someone who has learned to suppress feelings for survival. "It seems the gods granted my wish. Just not in the way I expected." Marcus's response reveals how much his son's disappearance has changed him, tempering his military rigidity with hard-won wisdom about the cost of duty and the importance of family bonds that can't be restored through discipline or commands. "I came here to bring you home," he tells his son, not as a soldier retrieving a deserter, but as a father who failed his child and wants the chance to do better. The plan that Marcus develops to save his son requires him to abandon everything he has believed about honor, duty, and the proper conduct of a Roman officer. Working with Gaius and leveraging every connection he has built during his military career, he begins assembling the resources needed not just to purchase Lucius's freedom, but to expose and destroy the corruption that has trapped dozens of other fighters in similar situations. The investigation reveals that Quintus Maximus Brutus, the Ludus owner, is part of a vast criminal network that extends into the highest levels of Roman society. Senators and wealthy merchants have been manipulating gladiatorial contests for years, using insider knowledge to place enormous bets while ensuring that the outcomes serve their financial interests rather than providing genuine entertainment for the crowds. The confrontation with his former wife Claudia proves to be one of the most difficult challenges Marcus faces in his quest to save their son. When he tracks her down to her new home in an upscale Roman neighborhood, where she lives as the wife of a prosperous merchant, he finds a woman transformed by years of bitterness and resentment into someone he barely recognizes. "So the great Centurion finally comes home," Claudia greets him with cold sarcasm that cuts deeper than any barbarian weapon. "5 years too late as usual. Did it never occur to you that if you had spent half as much energy on your family as you did on your precious legion, our son might never have run away in the first place?" The argument that follows forces Marcus to confront truths about himself that his military career has allowed him to avoid. Claudia's accusations aren't entirely unfair. His devotion to duty had indeed come at the cost of his family relationships, and his rigid discipline had driven away the son he was trying to protect and prepare for adult life in a dangerous world. But Claudia's revelations about events following Lucius's disappearance shock Marcus even more than her anger. "I knew he was alive,"
She admits after hours of bitter recrimination, "I received messages from slave dealers offering to sell him back to us, but I was so angry, so hurt by his rejection of everything we had tried to give him, that I refused to pay. I told myself he had made his choice and would have to live with the consequences." The realization that their son could have been rescued years earlier, that his enslavement and suffering could have been prevented if either parent had acted differently, creates a bond of shared guilt that begins to rebuild the connection between Marcus and Claudia. Their renewed partnership, forged in remorse and determination to save their child, becomes the foundation for everything that follows. Working together, they begin to understand the full scope of the criminal enterprise that has entrapped Lucius. The Gladiator schools aren't just entertainment venues, but sophisticated money-laundering operations that allow wealthy Romans to convert legitimate profits into untraceable gambling winnings while providing spectacular shows that keep the population distracted from political and economic problems.
The plan they develop requires Marcus to infiltrate the criminal network by posing as a corrupt frontier officer willing to sell information about barbarian military capabilities to gladiator trainers looking for exotic new fighting styles. His genuine military knowledge and authentic warrior scars make him credible to criminals who deal regularly with discharged soldiers seeking to profit from their combat experience. Through this deception, Marcus gains access to the inner workings of the ludus and learns that Lucius's situation is even more dangerous than initially revealed. The young gladiator has been building a resistance network among the fighters, planning a coordinated escape attempt that could free dozens of enslaved fighters, but would almost certainly result in massive retaliation against anyone who fails to get away. He's trying to save everyone, Octavia explains during a clandestine meeting arranged through intermediaries. Not just himself, but every fighter who's been trapped in this system. He says that a true Roman warrior protects those who cannot protect themselves, even if it costs him his own freedom. The irony isn't lost on Marcus. His son has internalized the military values he tried to teach him, but is applying them in ways that put him at even greater risk than simple gladiatorial combat. Lucius has become the leader Marcus always hoped he would be, just not in the service of the empire his father devoted his life to defending. The complexity of the situation increases when Marcus learns that several of the enslaved gladiators are actually Roman citizens who disappeared under circumstances similar to his son's case. Veterans who fell into debt, young men who ran away from family obligations, even former soldiers who deserted their posts, all have been swept up in a system that treats them as property regardless of their legal status or citizen rights.
The rescue operation Marcus plans represents the most complex military action of his entire career, requiring coordination between legitimate authorities, reformed criminals, and enslaved fighters to simultaneously expose the corruption and liberate the victims. The timing must be perfect. Too early, and the evidence of criminal activity disappears. Too late, and Lucius dies in his rigged final contest. Working with Gaius and other military contacts, Marcus arranges for a surprise inspection of the ludus by officials who aren't part of the criminal network. Meanwhile, Claudia uses her new husband's business connections to trace the financial arrangements that fund the illegal gambling operations, building a legal case that could destroy the entire enterprise. The most dangerous part of the plan involves Marcus himself entering the arena as Lucius's opponent in what's supposed to be his son's death match. Using forged documents and his legitimate military credentials, he poses as a veteran fighter making a comeback, someone skilled enough to provide spectacular entertainment while ensuring the predetermined outcome desired by the criminal conspirators. But Marcus's real intention isn't to kill his son or die for the amusement of Roman crowds. It's to use the public venue of the arena to expose the corruption while giving Lucius and the other enslaved fighters the distraction they need to implement their escape plan. The combat between father and son becomes an elaborate performance designed to buy time while authorities move against the criminal network.
The final confrontation in the arena represents everything the gladiatorial games were supposed to symbolize: courage, skill, honor, and the triumph of Roman values, but in ways the corrupt organizers never intended. As Marcus faces his son across the sand where so many fighters have died for entertainment, both men understand that they're fighting not just for Lucius's freedom, but for the redemption of their family and the exposure of crimes that have destroyed countless lives. The combat that follows is unlike anything the Roman crowds have ever witnessed. Instead of the brutal efficiency designed to produce quick deaths for gambling purposes, father and son engage in a display of swordsmanship that showcases genuine military skill while allowing them to communicate through the language of weapons they both understand perfectly. Every move Marcus makes tells his son something crucial about the rescue operation unfolding around them. Every response from Lucius demonstrates his understanding and his readiness to act when the moment comes. To the audience, they appear to be evenly matched gladiators putting on a spectacular show. But their real conversation involves tactical coordination that draws on years of interrupted but still powerful family bonds. The turning point comes when the corrupt officials realize that their carefully orchestrated death match has become something entirely different from what they planned. As they attempt to intervene and force the predetermined outcome, Marcus and Lucius abandon their performance and fight together against the guards attempting to restore control over the situation. The sight of father and son standing back to back against overwhelming odds transforms the crowd's bloodlust into something approaching genuine admiration for courage and family loyalty. The spectators, who came expecting to see a rigged execution, instead witness an authentic demonstration of the Roman virtues the games were supposed to celebrate, creating popular support for the fighters that makes official intervention politically impossible.
The resolution comes not through violence, but through the systematic exposure of the criminal network that has corrupted Rome's most popular entertainment. As Marcus and Lucius fight together in the arena, Gaius leads a coordinated raid on the ludus that frees dozens of enslaved fighters, while seizing financial records that document years of illegal gambling operations and political corruption. The evidence gathered during the investigation proves sufficient to destroy not just Quintus Maximus Brutus, but the entire network of officials, merchants, and aristocrats who profited from human misery while claiming to provide patriotic entertainment for Roman citizens. The scandal reaches into the highest levels of society, forcing genuine reforms in how gladiatorial schools are regulated and how fighters are treated. For Marcus and Lucius, the public vindication of their struggle creates an opportunity for genuine reconciliation based on mutual respect rather than paternal authority or filial obligation. The young man who refused to become a soldier has proven himself as courageous and honorable as any legionary, while the father who failed to understand his son's perspective has demonstrated that duty to family can be as important as duty to state. The reunion with Claudia completes the family healing that began with shared guilt and evolved through collaborative effort to save their child. She has learned that her bitterness toward Marcus's military career blinded her to his genuine love for their family. while he has discovered that his rigid discipline arose from fear of losing those he cared about, rather than indifference to their needs and feelings. Octavia's freedom comes as part of the broader liberation of enslaved gladiators, and her relationship with Lucius provides him with the emotional support needed to overcome years of trauma and exploitation. Their partnership becomes a symbol of how love can survive even in the darkest circumstances, offering hope for building better lives after experiencing the worst that human nature can inflict. The final scene finds the reunited family leaving Rome together, not fleeing from justice, but choosing to build new lives in a place where Marcus's military pension can support them all, without the constant reminders of past failures and lost opportunities. Marcus has learned that being a good father requires different skills than being a good soldier, while Lucius has discovered that his inherited warrior spirit can serve purposes more meaningful than imperial conquest or crowd entertainment. As you watch them disappear into the countryside toward a future filled with possibility rather than regret, you understand that you've witnessed something remarkable. A demonstration of how family bonds can survive even the most devastating failures, and how redemption becomes possible when people find the courage to admit their mistakes and work together to repair the damage they have caused. Their story becomes an inspiration throughout the empire, proving that Roman values of courage, honor, and loyalty mean nothing if they don't extend to protecting those we love most. The centurion who spent his career defending Rome's borders learned that his most important battle was always the one fought to save his own family, and that victory in that struggle was worth more than any military triumph the empire could offer.